Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, as the 40th anniversary approaches, a conference is convened to remember Air India Flight 182 in Canada. Will we ever see true justice for this shocking terrorist act? In Punjab, Khalistan freedom fighter Bhai Jagtar Singh Hawara has been acquitted on all remaining cases against him after being convicted of one of the perpetrators of the mass extrajudicial killings in the region during the 1990s, Beant Singh. The recently announced trade deal between India and the UK comes into the spotlight as critics say it proves that the British government really just does put money ahead of the safety of its Sikh community. And we take a look at a new show breaking into mainstream TV that tells a story of a Sikh YouTuber seeking his fame and fortune on the platform. All this and more on today's show, but joining me as always for Perspectives is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Thanks for coming back to start off another week, and we hope that you'll stick with us all week and make sure you keep your comments coming to us because we love to share them at the end of the show, so stick around. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed we do, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world, and indeed, as usual, we will take a look at loads of great comments at the end of the show, so do stay tuned for that. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this week?
Over this past weekend, of course, we talked about it briefly at the end of last week, and that was the conference that was being held at Hamilton, Ontario's McMaster University. Now, they did this approximately 10 years ago, and it had to do with the Air India Flight 182 and celebrating the victims of that Air India devastating bomb that took place. Now, when I say celebrating, what I'm referring to is the memory and allowing not only the memory to live on, but to also share the memories of the victims with the next generation. Now, the Air India bombing has been a very central part of Canadian history because no other point in Canadian history has an attack against Canada or based from Canada taken so many lives. At the time, it was the largest air disaster also in the world until 9/11 happened. Now, of course, we know that the world around us knows all about 9/11, but a lot of people have not been aware, especially within Canada, of the significance and what happened with Air India Flight 182. Now, the whole idea of this conference, which was held again 10 years ago, and now they've marked the 40th anniversary, and their whole goal is to educate the public not only on the impact of that devastating day, but also the major links to Canada and the major impact it had on Canada, because again, the next generation doesn't seem to know much about it. There's been a real drop in terms of the education within our school systems and within Canadian society as a whole. One of the program coordinators for this conference is also putting together an online digital archive of information about the Air India disaster, as well as archiving reports, letters, photos, and information from family members of victims of that fateful flight. The whole goal of the conference that's held over the weekend, this past weekend, so it just wrapped up yesterday, and they wanted to educate the wider public, as I said, because one of the professors that's involved in this program states that a lot of students excuse me, sorry about that. A lot of the students that are coming into her university classes are not actually aware of the Air India Flight 182 and the significance it played in Canadian history, but also the lives that were lost. So with this said, they also want to honor the victims by having the advocacy and the voices heard of the families of those victims. They've been putting all kinds of different archives together that'll be freely available coming up soon on the internet. So then people can actually not only look at all of the archives and look at all of this information, excuse me there, but they can also help to create lesson plans for schools, whether it's elementary or secondary schools throughout Canada, to educate their students before they reach a university level. They want to exchange information also between the community and artists and filmmakers and others to really create more of a public awareness within Canadian society. And as I said, they want to have that open repository of information that's available. And they've also done many interviews with the families of the victims. There have been some very touching stories and information that's come out. And of course, that can never be looked at as a replacement for those lives lost. But again, the importance of this conference to not only bring forward the information, but it also keeps the pressure on what is seen as a very, you could almost say a real polarizing issue. And that is whether or not the Canadian government should reopen a new investigation and inquiry into the crime, or allow the other victims on the other side to have peace, just knowing that it's in the past and not to drag up those old wounds. So again, it's been a discussion that's gone on for years. We've talked about it several times, Angus. But again, this is a very big conference that really helps to bring it all together, but also helps in some ways to the families to be able to get together and to be able to share their shared experiences and their stories, and be able to sit in a room with people that have gone through the same devastating loss that they have. And we know that when you are healing from trauma and from loss, sometimes that pain can last decades, as this has. Excuse me, but this gives, again, the opportunity for people to get together that have lost due to this horrific act of terrorism, and who was responsible is still up in the air when it comes to holding people directly responsible for the flight, for the bombings, and also the bomb that exploded in the Tokyo's main airport. That bomb was sent from Vancouver to Toronto, where it left on a flight going to Japan. And if it had not been for the miscalculation of daylight savings time, or the fact that Japan does not follow that, then the bomb could have gone off in the air on a flight going from Tokyo to, sorry, I forgot where that one was going. But in any event, it could have taken down another Air India flight. So again, it was the loss of several lives of baggage handlers at the Tokyo airport. But again, it could have been much, much worse on that device. So once again, we look at this, it comes up, and again, we remember the victims of all nationalities, all races, all ethnicities or backgrounds, because there was a very concentrated population or passenger count of Indians, but at the same time, there were others on the flight as well. So each and every one of those lives is essential. And in the final point that I wanted to make about this is that although there was at some point some reparations and some financial assistance available to the families of the passengers on the flight, it was a lot different for the crew members, including the pilots. Their families actually, some of them, including the co-pilot, were actually destitute afterwards because they didn't get anything really from any of the governments in terms of support. They received a very minimal and small pittance to help in the direct aftermath, but there was nothing for ongoing support of the co-pilot's family and his wife that he left behind. So again, the story of Flight 182 is one that is etched in the annals of Canadian history. But we've got to really do better at educating the future generations, Angus, to ensure that they know what happened and to never let those lives be lost in vain, as they say, Angus.
Yes, indeed. And as history has taught us, when we have grave miscarriages of justice, there are always two polarized sides that always reflects on these events. One side, of course, just wants to let it lie and let life move on and let's forget about it. And the other side will not let it lie. They want to keep the story alive because they feel there has been a grave miscarriage of justice. I think in the Air India bombing, it's very telling, of course, that we have the same polarization. On the one side, we have a group of people saying, look, let's just move on, let's just let it lie, let's just forget about it, life goes on, let's remember the people, but we must move on. Then we have the Sikh community who are quite vocal and saying, look, no, we cannot let this lie. There has to be a new investigation. There is evidence, there is too much evidence out there that there has been a grave miscarriage of justice. And it's interesting also telling that many of those pushing for life to go on and let's let it lie, that's coming from, I would say, a lot of Indian sources, a lot of orchestration from Indian sources. And of course we often know that who the hidden hand of control is there. It's Hindutva, it's the RSS forces. They'll be the ones saying, okay, we know who did it, it's the Khalistani terrorists, let's move on. The narrative has been set, let's set it in stone forevermore, that forevermore it will be known that Khalistan terrorists brought down this aircraft. But there does appear to be this huge miscarriage of justice. There is a whole ream of evidence that's been dug up by various people, not least the two investigative journalists who wrote a really powerful book setting out their concerns that there is just too much evidence pointing to the fact that this bombing was a false flag operation by Indian intelligence to deliberately smear the Khalistan movement. And indeed, they have done this over and over again. So their modus operandi is not unprecedented. They have done it before. So it is really not far from the realms of impossibility that Indian intelligence was behind this bombing. And therefore, the Sikh community, rightly so and justifiably so, are saying we cannot let this lie. Of course we understand the pain and heartbreak for those who have suffered, the families who still today suffer from their losses. But ultimately, even surely they must want the truth. They must not be denied the actual truth of what happened in this bombing. That if indeed there is this huge element of doubt about who actually was behind it, and the real perpetrators have got away with it so far, then surely even they must want to find out that truth. And that is a common theme in so many massive miscarriages of justice, whether it's individuals or whether it's terrorist bombings, whatever happens. We've had it over and over again. Here in the UK, we've had several high-profile cases of very similar situations where people have been imprisoned for things that they have not done, and there has been the same polarized opinion. No, let's just move on. No, we need to reinvestigate this. And it's those who have pushed and pushed and pushed, saying, no, we cannot let this lie. We've got to investigate it. There is enough evidence out there to question the original conviction, and that is happening here with Air India. There is enough evidence out there to question the original conclusions that it is quite likely, and certainly beyond any sort of level of absolute doubt, that Air India bombing was perpetrated by the Indian state, James. So yeah, unfortunately, sadly for the poor families who really must be suffering even now, we must get to the truth of what happened, and that can only happen if this investigation is reopened, James.
Absolutely. And I recall the time in which this happened here and the mood in Metro Vancouver. It had a very profound and big impact on the Vancouver community. And although I was just a child at the time, I was about 12 years old, I still remember several of my Indian and Sikh friends that also were devastated by what happened that fateful day. So again, it is something that I believe needs to be really educated to the next generation so that it's never forgotten. And as I said, we remember those lives. As you can see in the image on the screen there, Angus, the images I show were the memorial in Vancouver's Stanley Park, the Air India Memorial. And what's interesting about that is that with the wall and the names on it, the memorial with the names and the wall are actually very similar to the ones that are in Toronto, in Montreal, and other places internationally as well. So they all are pretty much identical in terms of their design, which I think really gives continuity to the importance and the significance of that fateful day, Angus. So with that said, we will look at something a little less sad or a little less emotional, so to speak. We're going to take a look at a Canadian TV show that we have spoken about previously, Angus, and it is in the second season of what was a series called Late Bloomer. And that is on a streaming service called Crave TV. Now, it is about a community that we're very familiar with, and that is Brampton, Ontario, just outside of Toronto, but also one of the largest Sikh communities within the country. So it's really cool to not only see Sikhs actually in the limelight on the small screen, but also that it takes place in a real, not a fictitious Canadian city. Now, the show is adapted by the main storyteller and actor in the series, who actually made his directorial debut this season as well. And I've actually subscribed to Crave so that I could watch this series. And I must say, I'm really enjoying it. It is smart, it's witty, but it also has a lot of references to various significant parts of Sikhi, and the fact that it's educating the public on whether it's the turban or Sava or Langar, all of these different things that are coming up in the series are really, really cool, because it shows that it's reaching a mainstream. But not only that, with season 2, it shows how well it's been received, and actually critics have been raving about it as well, and stating that there has been just an amazing breakthrough. Now, the star and the creator of the show is Jasmeet Raina, who is also a well-known YouTuber. He's a comedian and does various things. And if you're on YouTube, you can always find Just Rain, and it's on the screen there. But you can check out his YouTube as well. But if you haven't had the opportunity, try to find a way to watch it. I believe that it may actually be coming out on Amazon Prime as well, starting in the first season, so you can check that out. But it's very, as I said, it's lightweight in terms of the comedy. It's not a heavy emotional type series. It's actually comical. It has drama, but it also shows the struggles of first and second generation Sikhs who have arrived in Canada. They are struggling between the deep roots and cultural values of Sikhi, while also trying to fit in to the Western society. So it's really interesting to see that way. But again, it also, to me, when you watch it, and you really start to realize that whether it is in the Sikh community or in here in my world, the Caucasian community, and that, there's so many references between the parents and the son and his friends, and that just, you could see that as a transition from any culture and any ethnicity, and the way that it works. And, the parents looking, going, oh, this next generation doesn't listen. And, all of the same things that are spoken in different languages, but that as parents we can all relate to. And I'm sure that the younger generation watching this show, they all shake their head and laugh at the parents on the show saying, yeah, my mom and dad have said that. So it's really interesting on how they've really put this show together in such a very intelligent way. So I really, as I said, I've been really checking it out and really enjoying it. And hey, unfortunately, it's filmed in Toronto, or maybe I could have got a part on the show here as a walk-on just to show up in an episode or something. So that would have been fun. But unfortunately, they're filming on the other side of the country, essentially. Now, it is also looked at, and I'm just going to pull up a few of the points that I wanted to raise, and that was in season 2, which I'm about 4 episodes in right now. And it explicitly deals with the miscategorization and such of Sikhs after 9/11. So they're tackling these real issues and educating people on how this is really a hard transition for different ethnicities, especially when you compile on it the miscategorization of the Sikhs and how they were looked at and mistakenly identified with the 9/11 incidents that happened. So again, it really tackles some of the big issues, but in a way that's not in your face. It really has a mild way of bringing it into the story, but also a very impactful way as well. So, keeping that delicate balance is really essential and a hard thing to do on a TV show. And they seem to have hit the nail on the head. They've knocked it out of the park in terms of how they have been able to balance it. So The show's creation by Jasmeet, prominent Punjabi Sikh comedian, YouTuber, as I said, but that brings to ensuring that there's authentic and personal voice to the stories that he's bringing, and it's very loosely based on his life and his family. And I say very loosely, but again, it really helps to bring the whole Sikhi into light, to educate the viewers, and do it in a very fun and really comfortable position from sitting on your couch, but you're learning about it as well as enjoying the comedy of it. So again, congratulations to all of the cast, the crew, the writers, creators, and Crave TV for really bringing this to the screen in such a powerful way. And yeah, I'm sure that it'll hopefully see several more seasons ahead for Late Boomer.
Indeed. And yeah, I mean, James, how often have we talked about the media and the power of the media for the Sikh community if and when they manage to produce material, and certainly if it goes mainstream, that the educational value of that, even just for entertainment purposes, is great as of its own, but certainly the educational power of material like this is enormous, especially if it's really funny, if it's really engaging. Then the general wider public watch these things, and whether they realise it or not, they are absorbing information, they are absorbing an education about what Sikh is about, what Sikhs stand for, etc., etc. One of the key issues there that you brought out, 9/11. I mean, 9/11 clearly was such a huge event for the Sikh community, indirectly, but in turn directly. Of course, they were nothing to do with 9/11, yet they bore the brunt of the fallout from 9/11. Of course, one of the first victims of hate crime post 9/11 was a Sikh who was murdered. An innocent Sikh was murdered, I think, in a petrol station. In a filling station, believing he was a Muslim, and again, this is where education is so important, to say, look, we are Sikhs, this is what we are, this is what we represent, etc. And films like this, and also programs like this, but there was that recent film we talked about, American Sikh, another one that brought out that same issue, 9/11, the post 9/11 America, where Sikhs across America were really living in fear because they were being targeted as somehow being associated with the terrorists that attacked the World Trade Center. So these programs are so important to educate, just subliminally educate. And again, one example I always like to bring out, and I've mentioned it before, is one of my favourite films of all time, a film called East is East, which was set here in the UK, in the north of England, in a north of England town, where there's a large Pakistani and actually to some degree Indian population, but it was all about the lives of a multi-generational Pakistani family, where the father, this great patriarchal figure, was a first-generation Pakistan immigrant, married a white English woman, and they had children in the UK. And the story is all about how the children are trying to bridge the two worlds of Western culture, which of course they're enjoying, but of course the very traditional family values, the Islamic family values of the father, who's despairing, trying to bring his children up as good Islamic children, but of course they're being seduced by all the sins of the West, etc. But again, done in a very comedic fashion, and it's an extraordinarily powerful film, subliminally breaking down the barriers of people who see the Muslim world, for example, as outsiders. Suddenly they understand that those really challenging dynamics that these families have to live with between the cultures. And I think this series, James, is exactly the same, and probably will be as equally as powerful in getting that message across, educating the wider world about this is who we are, these are the challenges that we face, these are the daily struggles that we have to get through, and these are the cultural issues that we face on a daily basis. So extraordinarily powerful, James.
Yeah, and again, it's a very well done show. I've reached out to the production company to see if I could get an interview on the show, and I actually happen to converse once in a while with one of the actors on the show. So I'm hoping to get an official approval so we can have one of the actors come on the show one day very soon. So watch for that.
Fantastic. Well, we'll look forward to that, James. Indeed. Okay, let's move on to my first story. And in the Punjab, across in the great subcontinent, news came out over recent days of the freeing of a Khalistan freedom fighter by Jagtar Singh Hawara. Now, this guy has served a long time in prison. He was he was accused originally of the murder of the Chief Minister of Punjab, Beant Singh, back in 1995. Beant Singh he presided as Chief Minister over many, many years of extrajudicial murders of young Sikh men. Of course, many people have been associated with this. Many people have been guilty of this. KPS Gill, another name that we've been talking a lot about recently. And Beant Singh was another person, a very notorious figure linked to that genocide and these fake encounters, as they were called. And he, as a result, was assassinated, actually, as it turned out, by a car bomb. And by Jagtar Singh Hawara was linked to that car bomb, and he has basically been in prison ever since his conviction related to that. Now, Jagtar Singh Hawara at the time was a high-level member of the Baba Khalsa, and he's been serving life imprisonment in Tihar jail. And he was convicted at the time, back in the 90s, as a co-conspirator in that assassination of the 12th Chief Minister of Punjab, Beant Singh. And the event happened on the 31st of August 1995, and Dilawar Singh Babar, he was a suicide bomber who assassinated Beant Singh by blowing up his car at the Punjab and Haryana Civil Secretariat in Chandigarh. In that blast, unfortunately, there was a lot of collateral innocent damage. 17 people were killed, 15 others were injured. In 2007, he was actually convicted and was given a death penalty after a trial in Chandigarh court. Now, Hawara appealed to the Punjab and Haryana High Court, which in October 2010, 3 years later, commuted his death penalty to life imprisonment. And then he did actually recently appeal to the Supreme Court of India, which has now come through. But in 2004, Hawara actually came back into the limelight when he actually escaped from maximum security at the jail in Barail, along with 2 other Sikh prisoners, by digging, get this, a 90-foot tunnel with his bare hands. I mean, this guy, talking about being a fighter, this guy really is a fighter. He was eventually recaptured the following year in Delhi and, of course, returned to prison. Now, in and amongst all this, and to give you an idea of how the Sikh community viewed Jagtar Singh Hawara, in November 2015, he was declared to replace Gurbachan Singh as the interim Jatidar of the Akal Takht. That was done by a Sabak Khalsa organised at Chaba village on the outskirts of Amritsar. Now, of course, the Akal Takht is is the highest seat amongst the Panj, the five Takhts of Sikhi, and so he was named as the interim Jatidar, the leader of the Akal Takht. By Sikh organisation. So again, it just demonstrates how high this person was regarded by the Sikh community. Now, it demanded that all the current Jatidars, including Gurbachan Singh, be removed, but the SGPC president at the time, Avtar Singh Makar, condemned this appointment, and so they claimed at the time it was against the principles of Sikhism, and its decisions were null and void. And the SGPC added that the removal of the original Jatidar came under the Sikh Gurdwaras Act. Sorry, the removal of Hawara came under the Sikh Gurdwaras Act 1925. That's an act we have talked about in the past, and it was actually brought in by the British. And the SGPC claimed, therefore, that no one could challenge the SGPC's authorities. So back in 2015, when Hawara was appointed by, I guess, a large part of the Sangat to head the Akal Takht, to become Jatidar, the SGPC said, no, you cannot do this. We have the overriding authority under the Sikh Gurdwaras Act to override this decision. Now, what I don't know here is, was that I suppose an infiltrated decision created by the Badal family and thus the RSS, or was it something else? I don't know. I'm sure our audience might have an opinion on that, but certainly it does scream of that same issue, of that division, that division in the Sikh voice deliberately created by the RSS. So what actually happened recently? This happened last week. In Mohali, a local court acquitted Baba Khalsa International, the BKI chief, Jagtar Singh Hawara, who was serving this life sentence. But also the case specifically related to illegal arms and explosives. I think he was basically convicted of supplying the arms and explosives that led to that car bomb. But his acquittal paves the way for his parole. He was labelled as a high-risk prisoner, and he was serving his sentence in Delhi's Mandoli jail. and he attended the hearing via video link. The case accused him originally of involvement in the recovery of the illegal weapons and explosives, and authorities had framed charges in August 2023 under conspiracy, arms and explosive laws as well. But the court ruled that the prosecution had failed to provide it with sufficient evidence. And as his lawyer called Jaspal Singh Majpur said, the case was false and baseless. With this acquittal, all 32 cases against him have concluded. He is now eligible legally to apply for parole, and the verdict last week relayed to Mandoli jail officials through a video conferencing system. So, James, this guy who was convicted in 2007 for his role in the assassination of Beant Singh, fortunately, it does look like the case against him has been thrown out. Well, let's hope this has further indirect benefits for people like Amritpal Singh and those others who still reside in jail on all sorts of trumped up charges. But one by one, the slow pace of Indian justice does seem to be acquitting a lot of these people of these trumped up charges, and I'm sure, I have no doubt that the Sikh community will be celebrating the news that this Khalistan freedom fighter by Jagtar Singh Hawara has finally been acquitted, and hopefully he will seek parole very shortly. He will be a free man, James.
Well, and it's interesting to watch how the system works or doesn't work in India. And I mean, we've seen, as you brought up, Jaggy there, is that it seems like just an arbitrary system. The more that we see it as Westerners, it just boggles our mind how these people have been locked up for decades, or with Jaggy for years, without any real conviction or charges. The difference in this case was, of course, that he was convicted, but again, it went through the different appeals processes and then finally it was acquitted, and it takes decades for that to happen. But it also shows that there is a lack of transparency when it comes to the majority of the justice system cases that move through there. And again, that should be a big concern, because not only is it trumped up charges, or sometimes people are just kept detained without charges, and other times where, of course, there has to be some evidence. However, it seems more and more that the evidence was fabricated, and when it's actually brought together by anybody outside of the system, can look at it and see the holes like Swiss cheese, that there's so many holes in the case that it should never have gotten before a court, let alone somebody actually being arrested on the suspicion or on a first incident report. So again, Angus, it just shows the lack of transparency, but also the level of corruption. So I'm glad to see that that he's looking at getting parole, that he's getting released. But again, it's decades later, and if it truly is that he's acquitted because of the foundation of the charges or such, or, you know, just for whatever reason, again, why wasn't it done years ago as opposed to now?
Indeed. And the fundamental problem with the Indian judicial system is it has become completely and utterly politicised. And this is why Indian justice, particularly when it relates to Khalistan campaigners, to Sikhs in general, and again, there's so many examples of this. There's so many Sikhs still serving sentences way beyond the end of their normal sentences. Again, they are political prisoners. Amritpal Singh, again, who we talk regularly about, Jagtar Singh Jail, likewise. These are political prisoners. They are kept in detention arbitrarily through political power, through political control, not through just the general normal process of the rule of law. The system has been utterly politicised. It has been weaponised by the RSS, by the Brahmins, and they are terrified of the Sikh community, and anybody who dares stand up, put their head above the parapet in the Sikh community ends up in so many cases as political prisoners and kept there in detention essentially indefinitely. And India has weaponized the legal system to allow themselves legally, and I use that term slightly tongue-in-cheek, to legally keep these people indefinitely behind bars. It is an absolute democratic disgrace. So we will continue to highlight this absolute outrage of India and its failing judicial system. Right, James, let's move on to my second story. And in the Baz News, Jas Singh is one of the senior officers, I think that's the right term, one of the senior officers of the Sikh Press Association. And he's written a really interesting piece in Baz News a couple of days ago. And this is about the trade deal that's been agreed between India and the United Kingdom, which Keir Starmer, our Prime Minister, announced quite recently. And this trade deal comes post-Brexit. Of course, Brexit was a huge issue here in the UK. And post-Brexit, the UK government, whether it was the previous Conservative government or the current Labour government, they've been rushing around trying to tie up these trade deals with all sorts of countries all around the world. And India, of course, has been one of the prime targets. India, with its huge market and its huge population, it's been an absolute grand prize for the UK to try and tie up a trade deal. But of course, there is this huge history between the UK and India, and of course there is an awful lot of issues bubbling beneath the surface as we talk about on a regular basis. So Jas Singh has taken a look at this trade deal that was announced by Keir Starmer and looked at it in the context of what is going on with the Sikh community and certainly the recent history of the Sikh community. He's written a very powerful article, and I just want to go through this article and cherry pick a few issues that he's raised in this, because it once again highlights a lot of what we've talked about, but it does put his spin on this, and certainly his analysis, I think, highlights really what is going on here in the UK with the UK government and Narendra Modi's government. Jas says, amid a 2023 global assassination campaign targeting Khalistan figures in the diaspora, Avtar Singh Kanda was one of 3 shocking and sudden deaths. Of course, we talked about that a lot. In the USA and Canada, they likewise had their outrage, their transnational repression outrages, of course, the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar and the attempted assassination of Gurpreet Singh Pannu. Now, of course, in North America, as Jas says, huge actions and reactions were seen and taken over those attempted murders and murder of Nijjar. We had Justin Trudeau publicly standing up in the Canadian Parliament. We had the Biden administration actually calling out transnational repression. What happened in the UK? No action was taken. It should not go unnoticed either, as Jas continued, that the trade agreement announcement came just a day before India launched its its assault on Pakistan. This is a Freudian slip there. India launched its assault on Pakistan post-Pahalgam. India lent on its trade partner benefits with the UK to get away with this violence. And he says it's nothing new, and it was even central to UK government's involvement in India's 1984 Sikh genocide. Now, this trade deal, landmark trade deal as he calls it, announced on May the 6th, has been in the works since Brexit. But under this Labour government, agreements on imports, exports and immigration were finally signed for all to celebrate. Well, you say that. I think the critics have lined up in a long queue to say this has been an absolute, utter surrender treaty to India. Keir Starmer, once again, he's becoming known as Surrender Starmer because his negotiating skills are an absolute joke. They've become a national joke. He is giving away everything and receiving very little in return. And this trade deal, once again, seems to be another Starmer surrender. And as Jas Singh says, all except for some rightfully concerned British Sikhs are celebrating. For decades, Sikh calls against the Indian state interference in the UK have been ignored. The UK government even disregarded its own intelligence that were warning the UK government, look what India's doing to our Sikh community. And yet it's all being ignored by successive governments. Now, even Justin Trudeau spoke on links between India and the assassination of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. Joe Biden likewise raised the case when the Gurpreet Singh Pannu situation came up, but the UK government has remained noticeably silent in turn. Now, Avtar Singh Kanda's death should have triggered the moment the UK finally publicly denounced Indian interference, just as the Nijjar assassination in Canada did and the Pannu case did in the USA. But it didn't. This should have been the catalyst. This should have been the point when the UK government said, look, no, enough is enough. You cannot keep getting away with this. Yet, as Jas continues, instead of marking a turn in approach to foreign interference, it seems to have underlined that the UK is now in some ways subservient to its once colony of India, desperate for trade relations post-Brexit. Indeed, the dynamics here, as Jas is pointing out, are that instead of Britain being the dominant ex-colonial force dictating terms to India, it seems to be the other way round. The dynamics have reversed 180 degrees. It is now India who are dictating to the UK how things should be done. And many commentators have suggested the trade deal is proof of that too, with a strong belief India benefits much more from it, as indeed it turns out. When you look at the small print of this trade deal, India is coming out on top. Surrender Starmer has basically achieved nothing from this deal. The pressure from Modi's government on the UK has seen agreements to tackle pro-Khalistan extremism come about much quicker than this trade deal did, with examples being the random figure of £95,000 pledged by the UK to do so in 2023. Yes, indeed. We had this case a couple of years ago of a British minister, the Conservative minister, who said, yes, we have pledged as part of our budget £95,000 to specifically target Khalistan extremism. I mean, what a joke that was. Regular bizarre allegations of a Khalistani threat to the UK have been raised by government figures. All sorts of weird nonsense creations of this so-called Khalistani threat to the UK have been raised by government figures, but these claims ignore the research of CREST, that's the Centre for Research and Evidence on Security Threats, which released a report in 2017 saying that Sikh radicalisation was absolutely no threat to the UK public at all. In other words, the whole thing was an absolute fabrication. It was a nonsense. Of course it was a nonsense. It's an RSS-promoted myth that Khalistani extremism exists here in the UK, or indeed anywhere. India's arbitrary imprisonment of Jaggi in 2017 was found to have been supported by UK intelligence. Indeed, and I've talked a lot about this, is that we do know that MI5/MI6 passed intelligence to their counterparts in the Research and Analysis Wing, or the National Investigation Agency in India. They passed intelligence about Jagtar Singh Johal prior to his arrival in India for his wedding, after which he was immediately arrested and has since been arbitrarily detained. He remains tortured in prison thanks to British intelligence passed to the Indian intelligence. Likewise, just after that, there was a series of raids on Sikh activists across the West Midlands that came as a result from diplomatic pressure from Narendra Modi's government. And then we had, of course, the West Midlands 3 case. Again, we've talked about that in the past, that saw 3 Sikh activists that were India tried to extradite these 3 Khalistani campaigners. They forced the British government to investigate these 3 individuals. They were arrested, and it turns out they were completely and utterly innocent, and their extraditions to India were thrown out. But again, it's all about collusion between the UK and India, and it's all about pressure from India against the UK government, which the UK government keeps bowing down to. So, the big question that Jas raises, will the UK, going forward, need to become even more extreme in its targeting of Sikh activism to appease India? So, what he's saying, and this is a huge concern to the British Sikh community, is India now has the upper hand. India is the dominant party between India and UK. So India is now dictating terms to the British government. So is Surrender Starmer once again going to bow down to Indian pressure? And is he going to instruct law enforcement, the British agencies, to target increasingly more the Sikh community? Is Sikh activism, Sikh activists, Khalistani activists, going to become increasingly targeted by the British government and its law enforcement agencies? That is a worrying question. Now, the UK Labour government may, in theory, be able to finally bring Jagtar Singh Johal home now the deal's been agreed. And of course, Sikh pressure on the government is building. We've talked a lot about these letters going in thanks to the Sikh Federation UK, lobbying and coordinating this campaign from grassroots to pressure MPs who in turn to pressure the government. So the pressure is building on the Starmer government. Many believe the new trade deal will only enhance India's dominance in the relationship, so that is concerning, especially given groups with deep links to Modi are in line to benefit from it. So, of course, thanks to Surrender Starmer, there are stakeholders in this trade deal that are directly benefiting from this deal. It stinks, doesn't it? We've heard this before. But what is clear, though, as Jas Singh says, is that justice for Bhai Avtar Singh Kandar will not come via the British government, although groups are still pursuing legal action. And that is because the Labour government's Prime Minister Starmer is doing just what his Conservative predecessors did, putting trade deals with India above Sikh lives. I couldn't put it better myself, James.
Absolutely, Angus. And before the show tonight, we were talking about the documents that were unclassified, the top secret letters that went back and forth between the UK government or the British government and the government of India back in 1984, right before the attack on Operation Blue Star. But a lot of the contents of those letters really ring true still today, and that is how the UK is afraid of dealing or upsetting India. And right in the letters from the security, I forget the person's title there, the Secretary of Security or somebody anyway, they had very clearly stated that they don't want to upset India, that the Indian government may not understand if they don't bend to their will, or, just different things to that nature that really still ring true today, that we haven't seen a change in that stand. And that is disgusting, that they are still bowing down and taking direction that way. And it should also be noted that with these top secret documents that are now available, the only reason that they ended up being mandatorily brought forward in an inquiry was the fact that 2 of them were accidentally leaked at that time. And I believe that was probably about 10 years ago, maybe a bit longer. But in any event, the 2 documents that led to a full inquiry that, again, went nowhere because a lot of the details were destroyed, hidden, or the people that were involved had deceased, so they couldn't get a full report and inquiry into the events of the UK involvement in Operation Blue Star. But again, I just brought that up, Angus, because of the fact that how similar a lot of the same lines of excuses by the government are playing true today still.
Absolutely right. And as I say over and over again, and I'm very disappointed to say it, is that the community's faith in the Labour government, I think, is deeply misplaced. I think the expectations were just way too high. Starmer, in opposition, made all sorts of promises, as politicians always do in opposition. They always make all sorts of promises, and Starmer was very explicit in his promise, as many of his colleagues were. We will launch an inquiry into British involvement in 1984. We will free Jagtar Singh Johal, etc., etc. And they've been in power now nearly 1 year. And still, nothing has changed. Nothing whatsoever has changed. We are still in exactly the same position. In fact, arguably, as Jas Singh says in this article, we're actually in a worse position, is that India has just demonstrated it has the upper hand. And the surrender Starmer has not just given in. He's actually laid out the carpet for Narendra Modi's government and said, yeah, you tell us what we should do. We will take the knee. We will bend before you, Mr. Modi. You tell us what you want us to do. We will do it. That is essentially the message that Starmer has sent out to the Sikh community, saying, sorry guys, I don't care about you guys, I'll do as I'm told by Narendra Modi. That is essentially the message that's gone out. There is no sign of any inquiry into 1984. There's still, despite acquittals, there's still no sign that Jagtar Singh Johal is coming home. Even David Lammy, our failing Foreign Secretary, is refusing to even meet Gurpreet, his brother, Jaggy's brother, to update and say, yes, I'm achieving great things to free your brother. No, it's not happening. Unfortunately, the Labour government is betraying the Sikh community, as indeed its predecessors, the Conservative government, did for so many years. So unfortunately, we're not surprised, but well, I take no pleasure in saying I told you so, but unfortunately there we are. All we can do though, James, is we can keep the pressure on, is that the Sikh community, as they are indeed doing so powerfully, is keep that pressure on, because governments only do things when they have no choice but to do them. And that is the position the Sikh community need to do. The Sikh Federation UK are using this tactic. They are pushing the UK government into a corner, saying, you act or else. And that is the only way that Starmer and his colleagues are actually ever going to do anything to actually act on behalf of those who elected them into that position of power. Right, James, on that note, let's move on to our comments column as the clock counts down. And again, loads of wonderful comments. Thank you to our audience for all your comments that have been pouring in by the bucketful, as always. And again, I'd say we've had right across the board all subjects covered, but I can only pick a very small selection today, especially as we're running out of time. But Jasvinder Singh starts us off today with, "I can't stop laughing when the Indian army said that they protected the Darbar Sahib from Pakistan attack." Indeed, I think this is one of the top comments, and I think a lot of people actually, and the key word here, James, is people are laughing at the Indian army. They are laughing at Indian propaganda now. Indian propaganda has lost its power, has lost its credibility. People are actually laughing when India makes these sorts of claims.
Well, and it's good, though, that people are starting to see through the facade and really seeing what's behind it. And what's behind it is not always pretty, but it's good that people are seeing it anyway.
And but the other side of the coin, Jaspal Chatterfeld does remind us of the other side of the coin, is that the majority of people, but domestically in the Punjab, do know the truth about these sorts of tactics about India. But they can't express their views openly due to the oppression, false cases, false encounter of Sikhs in Punjab. Indeed, this points to the dark side of what is actually going in the Punjab. If you dare actually point out to the authorities or even publicly what the Indian government are up to, then of course, even now, you're not just facing prison on trumped up charges, but these fake encounters seem to be increasing in number. And of course, more and more people are, certainly outside of India, are highlighting the fact, hang on, why are so many Sikhs dying in very suspicious circumstances in the Punjab and Haryana and neighbouring areas? Sikhs are dying in increasing numbers under very suspicious encounters with law enforcement, James. I think this is a huge cause of concern.
Absolutely, Angus. And again, looking at historical issues, back in 1984 with the attacks and such, there's some very interesting documents that I'll be bringing up later in the week as the show goes on, and we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how the police were involved then, how Amnesty International and other human rights groups had been demanding change, and even the United Nations had stepped in, and yet here we are in 2025, still seeing the same problems in terms of the police corruption and violence towards Sikhs.
We absolutely are in a so-called democratic nation. It's really quite shameful. Sawani Davis, excuse my pronunciation there. This is an interesting comment. We talk a lot about the relations between Sikhs and Pakistan. And this comment says, Pakistan is genuine when it comes to Sikhs. We have close historical ties as well as language and traditions. And then you talk about Bhai Madana, find out who he was. Well, I did. Thank you for this. And I did quickly look up who Bhai Madana is. And for those who may not be aware, Bhai Madana was one of the first Sikhs and long-time companion of Guru Nanak Dev Ji. Bhai Madana was a Muslim by birth, who then ended up accompanying Guru Nanak Dev Ji on his journeys around the region and became one of his first disciples and followers and converted to the newly established religion. So, of course, the first guru. So I think this is a really interesting comment because it does actually highlight several areas that we do touch upon. Firstly, of course, this link between Pakistan and the Sikhs and this I would say burgeoningly positive relations between Sikhs and Pakistan, particularly in the light of Pahalgam and what's going on at the moment. It does, of course, bring into the same equation those who are saying, just be a bit careful here because Sikhs in Pakistan have been persecuted to some degree. So those who are warning, don't trust Pakistan, who knows? But ultimately, there has been huge reaching out of friendship, certainly, forget the Pakistan government and everything, but certainly amongst many Pakistan people have reached out the hand of friendship to Sikhs, certainly in the Indian Punjab, but of course likewise from Pakistan Punjab, the western side of Punjab, they have reached out the hands of friendship. They are say there is the historical ties, of course, since 1947, pre-1947, but of course languages and traditions. And the final sign-off here was Sikhs are not stupid. Absolutely they are not. They are very shrewd. Sikhs have survived a very long time for a very good reason. They are not stupid. They're a very powerful, very sensible and very moral, upright community, James. So I think there's a lot packed into these few sentences, James.
Absolutely. And I mean, you can look at the history again, going back 1947, you go back way before that or even after, where the Sikhs were known for being smart. They were known for being very precise in their planning. They went after certain industries like agriculture and such, but they also were expanding out in other areas. While everybody's watching what they're doing in agriculture, they are growing other entrepreneurial businesses and really just killing it in terms of in a positive way. So yeah, they are very smart, they're very shrewd, and they know how to stick together and really support each other.
Indeed, which is why they've still formed such an existential threat to this Brahmanical control of India. That's why they are targeted, simply because they are so dangerous, they are so effective as a community. Humanity says India, in fact, attacked Darbar Sahib many times. It wasn't Pakistan, thus the accusations that Pakistan was targeting the Darbar Sahib. But as Humanity says, look, it's India, in fact, who's attacked the Darbar Sahib many times. Pakistan, since 47, never attacked a Gurdwara anywhere. Indeed, why would they? Why India think they can get away with so much disinformation in this day and age is beyond me. Well, in this day and age, information is the new weapon. That's why they think they can. And we do know that the Indian propaganda machine is enormous. It is hugely resourced. We have this figure of $450 million a year pouring from the RSS into this huge propaganda, this global propaganda machine to win this information war. That's why they think they can win it and get away with it. Fortunately for the Sikh community, it is very clear they are losing this war because they've just overcooked it, as we say, James. They've just lost credibility. They've just gone a little bit too far, and the world is waking up to the fact that this huge propaganda machine is not just in overdrive, steam is leaking from its sides. It is falling apart.
Absolutely. And if you want to see clear examples of the Western society, how they are also falling prey to this disinformation, look at the MAGA movement. Look at here in Canada with the truckers convoy. Look at I can give you an example for almost every country and how misinformation or other information gets out and how there are people that, regardless as to what side of the political sphere you're on, are going to buy into it, even if it is as crazy as some of the stuff we see come out of India and their propaganda machine. People still buy into it. And that is a big, dangerous weapon in itself when it comes to that disinformation and misinformation campaigns, Angus.
Absolutely right. And the point here in this comment is Pakistan was never attacked a Gurdwara. And it reminds me immediately of Chitting Singh Pura, the massacre, where allegedly Islamic terrorists who'd come over from Pakistan had massacred 36 Sikhs in cold blood. But again, it always comes back to the same question. As the Islamic community, the Muslim community said at the time, why would we? Why would we target Sikhs? They are our friends. We have worked together against Indian oppression. Why on earth would we be targeting our friends in the Sikh community? Likewise, again, it extends to why on earth would Pakistan attack Gurdwaras? Why make an enemy of a friend who has supported them in so many ways? So again, it stinks. It's absolute nonsense. And Charanjit Singh follows up with this person's comment. Everyone knows that the RSS and BJP are indeed the most right-wing against Sikhs. They have demolished 3 Gurdwaras and the Darbar Sahib is on their cards. I think this is a bit of a warning saying, look, they've already demolished 3 Gurdwaras. They would love, clearly, to demolish the Darbar Sahib. I don't really think they would dare go that far because certainly if they did, there would be a global, not just an outcry. I think the world would absolutely turn on India if they dared try and do that. And that's why actually a false flag is really the main concern here. But as you rightly say, I mean, the RSS have got a lot of damage in their track record, and of course not just Gurdwaras but mosques. How many mosques have we talked about that have been demolished and Hindu mandirs replacing them? Of course, we talked a lot about that recently. So yes, they come with quite a dangerous track record, James, the RSS.
They do, and something that we've covered many a times, and unfortunately, I'm sure that we'll be covering again in the future because unfortunately, we don't see a lot of change happening that way.
Yeah, and S. Baines really follows up the same theme, saying, look, over recent times, the concern really is that India already, we know, has attacked the Ahmadiyya Sahib in 1984. But the concern with India is that Sikhs did not show support for India's war against Pakistan. Of course, I think India was a little bit shocked. The Indian government, I dare say, was probably a little bit shocked, not surprised, but a little bit shocked about how the Sikh community in the Punjab and right across the diaspora didn't support India in their alleged defensive operation against Pakistan. They called out India for exactly what it was, the aggressor in this situation. They have tended to side with Pakistan. Of course, the Sikh population, the Sikh community, always stands up against injustice. They will always side with those who feel is in the right. And very clearly in the situation post-Pahalgam, they felt, as they've very vocally pointed out, they felt that the Pahalgam attack was a false flag. The attack on Pakistan was a deliberately orchestrated, aggressive attack. And that is what the Sikh community have publicly stood up and said. And I think India has actually become a little bit afraid and a little bit shocked about their own domestic Sikh population. And as you rightly say, S. Baines, Sikhs have become more politically mature and see themselves as separate from India. I think that goes with almost without saying, James.
Absolutely, and the Sikh community has also gotten much better at raising the awareness on the international stage, which has really given them, given them some power as well to empower themselves.
And our final set of comments, thank you to all of those who contributed here. Gurmail Burke says, I'm watching from London. Well, welcome to you in London. And Pam Singhey says, Khalistan Zindabad, Pam from Birmingham. So two of our main cities, our largest and second largest cities here in the UK, where of course we do have large Sikh populations. And we do know that many of you are watching from both London, Birmingham and other areas. Coventry, another one that springs to mind. So thank you and welcome to the show. Thank you for watching. Do tell others about our existence. We're trying to increase our audience, so we do want to reach out to more and more people. So thank you for your comments, and of course to our other audience members, wherever you are, let us know where you're watching from. It's always fascinating to know where you are watching from. And Sat Bachan Singh, another one of our regulars, says, respect to you, truth teller. And Mahi Sidhu says, love you. Well, we love you too. Great job, real people. James, we have been accused in the past of being AI avatars. I think even when I met somebody in the community said, we actually thought you were just AI generated figures, not real people. It came as a bit of a shock to find out that we are actually real people.
And it's funny to see that because I always love it. I love all these conspiracy theories about us.
It does make me laugh. And Sam Singh signs us off, gets the final word of the show. Always on spot. You guys are the only trustworthy news on YouTube about Sikh issues. Well, that's a very, very lovely thing to say. I don't think we are the only trustworthy news. There are many, many wonderful Sikh community channels out there that really do, of course, bring the news. But obviously from a Punjabi perspective, we are from our own Western perspectives. But hopefully in that, James, we are still providing trustworthy news. That is what we stand for, James.
And don't forget to tell all your friends, family, co-workers, and everybody. Spread the word far and wide so we can see our numbers increase, get us up in the algorithms, and welcome more people to the program.
Please indeed do that. And do, of course, keep your comments coming in as they have been doing so. We really do enjoy reading all your comments, so thanks for that. But that is it for Another Perspectives. Thanks so much for joining us once again. Do keep the comments coming in. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satlodgt.com if there's anything you'd like to bring to our attention. But in the meantime, thank you so much for your continuing loyalty. Thank you for all the comments. Do keep them coming. We will see you next time. It's a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.